The 8 seconds Muhammad Ali stared into Cleveland Williams' eyes in the third round of their fight, he saw something that would haunt him for years. A man who'd already died once and was being asked to die again for entertainment. 18 months earlier, Williams had been shot by a highway patrolman during a traffic stop. The bullet tore through his abdomen, destroyed a kidney, shredded his intestines, left him barely alive on the side of a Texas road. And now he was in a ring trying to fight the fastest heavyweight in the world. His body held together by surgery and desperation, while Ali threw punches and wondered if winning could ever feel like murder. What happens when you realize your opponent isn't fighting you? They're fighting to survive another day. May 1965, somewhere on a Texas highway, and Cleveland, Big Cat. Williams was driving home from a training session when red and blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. Routine traffic stop, or so he thought. The kind of interaction black men in Texas had learned to navigate carefully, keeping hands visible, voice respectful, movement slow. Highway Patrolman Jerry Gann approached the vehicle. What happened next depends on who tells the story. Gann's report said Williams became aggressive, reached for something that could have been a weapon. Williams, from his hospital bed weeks later, said he'd done nothing except exist while black in a state where that was often crime enough. What's undisputed is this: Gann drew his service weapon and fired. Once, the bullet entered Williams' abdomen, traveled through his body with the kind of destruction only high-velocity metal can create, and exited leaving a wound that, by all rights, should have been fatal. Williams collapsed on the roadside, blood pooling beneath him. And for 20 minutes, 20 minutes that must have felt like eternity, he lay there waiting for an ambulance while his life leaked out onto Texas dirt. When do seconds become hours? When you're dying and help is slow to arrive for someone the system doesn't value. The ambulance ride to the hospital was touch and go. Williams drifted in and out of consciousness, his body going into shock, his blood pressure dropping to levels where most people don't come back. The ER team worked with the urgency of people trying to stop a flood with their bare hands. Transfusions, emergency surgery, desperate attempts to repair damage that seemed irreparable. The bullet had destroyed his left kidney completely, necessitating its removal. His intestines had been shredded, requiring hours of careful suturing. His abdominal wall had been compromised. Internal bleeding was extensive. 4 separate surgeries over the next 6 weeks, each one revealing new complications, new damage, new reasons Williams shouldn't survive. But somehow, through sheer physical resilience or stubborn refusal to accept death's invitation, he did survive. Though survival is a complicated word when what you're surviving has fundamentally changed what survival means. The doctors were clear his boxing career was over. The physical trauma was too severe. The internal damage too extensive. 1 kidney wasn't enough for the demands of professional athletics. The abdominal injuries would never fully heal. Williams lay in that hospital bed, tubes running into his body, keeping him alive, and heard the diagnosis that should have been relief. You survived, but felt like condemnation. You'll never fight again. And for a man whose entire identity was built on being a fighter, who'd climbed out of poverty through violence, who knew no other skill, no other way to provide, that diagnosis was its own kind of death sentence. What do you become when the only thing you know how to do is taken away? Who are you when your body can no longer do what your identity requires? 6 months in the hospital became 12 months of recovery, became the realization that recovery wasn't returning to who he'd been but learning to live as someone diminished. Williams tried to train again against every medical recommendation. His body screamed protest. Pain where the kidney had been. Weakness in his abdomen where muscle had been cut and repaired but never regained its integrity. Exhaustion that came faster than it should have. He needed pain medication just to get through the day, pills that helped him function but created their own dependency, their own problems. His family needed money. Hospital bills were crushing. The shooting had taken not just his health but his livelihood, and while he'd survived the bullet, surviving poverty was proving harder. So when the offer came to fight again, small shows at first, opponents who wouldn't push him too hard, purses that were modest, but necessary. He accepted. Not because he wanted to. Not because he felt ready. But because the alternative was watching his family sink while he sat useless, a former fighter unable to fight, unable to provide, unable to be the man he'd built himself into. The first fight back was brutal not because he lost. He won, actually, against an opponent carefully selected to not present real danger, but because every moment hurt. Every punch he threw sent pain radiating through his abdomen. Every shot he absorbed reminded him his body wasn't what it used to be. But he'd won, and winning meant money, and money meant survival. So he kept fighting, kept taking pain pills to manage the constant ache, kept telling himself this was temporary, that his body would remember, would heal, would return. It was a lie. But sometimes lies are the only thing keeping you moving forward. Can you choose between your body and your family? And if you have to choose, is it really a choice? Then came the call that should have been an honor, but felt more like a summons to execution. Muhammad Ali wanted to fight him. Not Ali specifically. Promoters wanted Ali, and they needed a name opponent, someone with recognition, someone who'd draw a crowd. Cleveland Williams, before the shooting, had been that name. A devastating puncher. A fighter who'd given Sonny Liston trouble, a legitimate contender. After the shooting, he was still a name, but now a name attached to a body that couldn't deliver what the reputation promised. Everyone in boxing knew this. The promoters knew Williams was diminished. Ali's team knew. The boxing commissions that approved the fight knew. But the fight was approved anyway because money talks louder than safety, and a Williams name on the poster sold tickets even if the Williams in the ring was a shadow of his former self. The purse was significant. More money than Williams had seen since the shooting, enough to make a real difference for his family. So he signed. His wife cried when he told her. Not tears of joy. Tears of fear, of resignation, of knowing she was watching her husband volunteer to be hurt because they had no choice. Please don't do this, she'd begged. And Williams, holding her, feeling the pain that lived permanently in his abdomen now, said the only thing he could say, I have to. We need the money. How do you explain to someone you love that you're choosing to be hurt? That poverty is a violence slower than bullets, but just as deadly. That sometimes survival requires sacrifice, and you're the sacrifice. She didn't have to understand. She just had to let him go. And she did, because what else could she do? Love doesn't stop necessity. Muhammad Ali, in the weeks before the fight, heard about Williams' shooting. Angelo Dundee, his trainer, mentioned it casually during a strategy session. Williams isn't the same fighter. That shooting destroyed him. His movement's gone. His powers diminished. This should be straightforward. Ali nodded, accepting the information, but something about it bothered him. He'd seen fighters decline before. Age, too many wars, the accumulation of damage. But this was different. This was a man who'd been shot, who'd nearly died, who by all medical logic shouldn't be fighting at all. At the press conference before the fight, Ali saw Williams for the first time since the shooting. The physical change was obvious. Williams was still big, still carried himself with a fighter's posture, but there was something in his eyes. Emptiness. Not fear exactly, but absence. Like part of him had stayed on that Texas roadside and never come back. Ali did his usual routine, talked trash, made predictions, entertained the reporters who'd come expecting a show. But his heart wasn't in it. Between jokes, he'd glance at Williams, trying to read him, trying to understand what he was seeing. And Williams just sat there, quiet, not engaging, not reacting, just existing in a space that felt more like obligation than choice. After the press conference, Ali asked Angelo, why is he doing this? Why doesn't he just retire? And Angelo, with the pragmatism of someone who'd been in boxing too long to be surprised by its cruelties, said simply, same reason anyone does anything in this business. He needs the money. But that answer didn't satisfy Ali, couldn't satisfy him, because needing money was one thing, but needing it badly enough to step into a ring when your body was held together by surgical scars and pills, that was something else. That was desperation masquerading as choice, And Ali, walking back to his hotel room that night, felt something he rarely felt before: fight's dread. Not fear of losing, fear of winning. Fear of what winning might mean if the man across from him was already beaten before the first bell rang. When does a sporting event stop being sport and start being something darker? And if you participate, what does that make you? November 14, 1966, the Houston Astrodome, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. This was Ali at his peak, fast, powerful, coming off dominant performances. The kind of fighter who made boxing look like art. The crowd expected a show, and Ali intended to give them one. In the opposite corner, Cleveland Williams wrapped his hands with the methodical slowness of someone trying to delay the inevitable. Each layer of tape another moment before he had to face what was coming. His corner men worked quietly, not with the energetic encouragement corners usually provide, but with the somber efficiency of people preparing someone for something painful but necessary. When the referee called them to the center for instructions, Ali looked at Williams, really looked, and saw the distance in his eyes, like Williams was watching himself from somewhere far away. They touched gloves. Ali said something, probably trash talk, probably meant to be fun, but Williams didn't react. Just turned and walked back to his corner, and Ali felt that dread deepen. The bell rang, and for the next 3 rounds, Muhammad Ali would deliver what many consider the most technically perfect performance of his career. But perfection, it turned out, could feel like cruelty. How do you celebrate dominance when the person you're dominating never had a chance? Round 1, and Ali came out moving. Not the careful, cautious movement of someone testing an opponent, but the fluid, beautiful movement of someone who knew they were better and wanted to prove it. Jab. Jab. Right hand. Combination. Williams tried to respond, but his body wouldn't cooperate. The speed that had once made him dangerous was gone, replaced by labored movements that arrived too late. Ali landed at will. Head shots, body shots, combinations that showcased his technical brilliance and Williams' inability to defend them. The crowd roared. This was what they'd paid to see: Ali dismantling someone, making it look easy, proving why he was champion. Between rounds, Angelo worked Ali's corner with satisfaction. Perfect, champ. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. But Ali wasn't listening. He was watching Williams' corner, watching them work on a man who looked more exhausted after 1 round than most fighters looked after 10. Watching them put the stool under him like he might not be able to find it himself. Watching Williams sit there, breathing hard, his face showing not determination, but resignation. Angelo noticed Ali's distraction. What's wrong? Ali shook his head. Nothing. I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. Something about this felt wrong. The ease of it. The lack of resistance. The sense that he was fighting not a person, but a ghost of a person. Going through motions because going through motions was all that remained. Can you be too good? Can dominance become uncomfortable when it's this one-sided? Round 2 was more of the same. Ali brilliant, Williams diminishing. And with each punch Ali landed, the wrongness grew. This wasn't sport. This was something else. But what? And how do you stop a fight nobody else thinks needs stopping? Round 3. Ali came out intending to end it. Not cruelly. He wasn't trying to hurt Williams more than necessary, but efficiently, wanting this to be over, wanting to stop participating in whatever this was. He cornered Williams, set up a combination jab to measure distance, right hand to the head to get Williams' guard up, left hook to the body to bring the guard down. The combination landed perfectly. Williams staggered. His legs wobbled. His eyes lost focus. And Ali stepped forward to finish it, pulling back his right hand for the punch that would end this. And then it happened. 8 seconds. Maybe less. Maybe more. Time doesn't measure properly in moments like this. Ali looked into Williams' eyes. Really looked. Not at Williams the fighter, but at Williams the person. And what he saw stopped him cold. Emptiness. Pain that had nothing to do with the punches just landed. Exhaustion that came from somewhere deeper than physical effort. Eyes that had already seen too much, survived too much, endured too much, and now had to endure this too. Eyes that said, I know I'm going to lose. I've known since I agreed to this fight. But I have to be here anyway. Because my family needs this. Because I don't have another option. Because a bullet took my choices away, and now I'm just trying to survive until survival isn't necessary anymore. In those 8 seconds, Muhammad Ali saw his own mortality, not his death. Williams wasn't going to hurt him, couldn't hurt him, but the knowledge that bodies break. That luck runs out. That the difference between the man throwing punches and the man absorbing them could be one traffic stop, one bullet, one moment when circumstance decides you're done. How many bullets had Ali dodged, metaphorical and literal, to still be standing here as champion? How much of his success was skill, and how much was just not being Cleveland Williams? And what did it mean to profit from beating someone the world had already beaten? These questions flashed through Ali's mind in those 8 seconds. The crowd noise faded. The Astrodome disappeared. There was just him and Williams, and the understanding that passed between them, spoken without words. We're both trapped. You by poverty and a bullet. Me by being the one everyone pays to watch beat you. Neither of us chose this moment, but here we are. And only one of us gets to walk away feeling like they won, except neither of us really wins. Do we? The moment passed. 8 seconds became 9, became 10. Ali's autopilot kicked in. The training, the muscle memory, the thousands of hours that made certain movements automatic even when his mind was elsewhere. He threw the finishing combination. Williams went down. Not from the power of the punch. Ali had pulled it slightly, some subconscious part of him refusing to inflict more damage than necessary. But from accumulated damage. From exhaustion, from a body that had been asking to stop for 3 rounds and was finally being allowed to. Williams hit the canvas and tried to get up immediately, the fighter's instinct to never stay down overwhelming the body's plea for rest. But his legs wouldn't cooperate. The referee was counting 3, 4, 5. Williams got to his knees 6, 7. Tried to stand 8. Made it halfway up 9. And on 9, the referee waved it off. Technical knockout, 3rd round. The crowd erupted. Muhammad Ali had just delivered what would be analyzed for years as one of the most technically perfect performances in heavyweight history. 70 punches landed in 3 rounds. A defensive masterclass, movement and power in perfect harmony. The kind of performance boxing aficionados study to understand what greatness looks like. But Ali, standing in his corner while the referee raised his hand, felt none of the usual post-victory elation. Felt instead like he'd participated in something he'd never be able to wash off. Cleveland Williams was being helped to his corner by his team, and even from across the ring, Ali could see the relief on Williams' face. Not disappointment, not shame, relief. Because it was over. He'd survived. He'd made it through. He'd get paid. And he wouldn't have to do this particular terrible thing anymore. When your opponent is relieved to lose, what have you actually won? The locker room after should have been celebration. It was for everyone else. Angelo praising the performance, Bundini shouting about greatness, reporters crowding in asking for quotes about Ali's brilliance. But Ali sat on a bench in the corner, quiet, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Angelo noticed, came over, asked if he was okay. That man shouldn't have been in there, Ali said quietly. Angelo, pragmatic as always. He's a professional. He made his choice. But Ali shook his head. Did he? Or did we make it for him because we needed a name on the poster? Angelo didn't have an answer to that. Or maybe he had an answer but didn't want to say it. Because the answer was uncomfortable, they did need a name. Williams was that name. And if Williams was willing to take the beating and the paycheck, who were they to refuse? This was boxing. This was the business. People got hurt. That's what they signed up for. Except Williams hadn't signed up to get shot by a cop. Hadn't signed up to lose a kidney and spend months in the hospital and come back diminished. He'd signed up for a career that was stolen from him. And now he was trying to salvage what remained, because the world doesn't stop sending bills just because you've been destroyed. When reporters asked Ali about the performance, "Best of your career! Williams never had a chance!" He smiled, said the right things, played the role. But the smile felt like a mask. And later, alone in his hotel room, he sat by the window looking out at Houston's lights and wondered. How many Cleveland Williams are there? How many fighters staying in the sport too long because they have no choice? How many men pretending their bodies still work because the alternative is admitting they're broken and broken men don't get paid? And what did it make him? Ali, the champion, the greatest, that his greatest performances sometimes came against men who shouldn't have been there. Was he great or just lucky? And could you separate greatness from luck when the system was designed to feed desperation into rings for entertainment? He didn't have answers. Just questions that would follow him long after the fight was forgotten by everyone else. Cleveland Williams fought a few more times after Houston. Each fight was worse, slower, more painful, more obviously a man past his expiration, trying to squeeze a few more dollars from a body that had nothing left to give. The pain medication he'd needed after the shooting became dependency. The injuries accumulated. The money he made barely covered the medical costs of staying functional enough to make that money. A vicious cycle with no exit except the one nobody wants to take until there's no choice. By the early 1970s, Williams retired. Not by choice, but because even the most desperate promoters wouldn't put him in a ring anymore. What followed was harder than fighting. Decades of poverty, of struggling to find work his broken body could handle, of pain that never left, of looking back at a career that had promised escape from hardship but delivered only different hardships. Ali went on to become the most famous athlete in the world. Williams faded into obscurity, another cautionary tale boxing produced, and then forgot. They never spoke again after that night in Houston. No reunion, no reconciliation. Just two men who'd shared 8 seconds of understanding and then went their separate ways, one to legend, one to obscurity. When Williams died in 1999, heart attack at 66, found in his mosque home, funeral attended by few, Ali was notified. He reportedly went into his room, closed the door, and cried. His wife asked him later why Williams' death affected him so much. "Because I should have stopped," Ali said. "When I looked in his eyes and saw he was already dead, I should have stopped. Should have refused to fight him. Should have done something. But I didn't. I just kept punching. And I won. And everyone celebrated. And he went home broken. And I never asked if he was okay. Never reached out. Just took my victory and moved on. And now he's dead, and I can't tell him I'm sorry. Can't tell him I saw what the world did to him. Can't tell him those 8 seconds changed me too, even if it didn't change anything for him. Can you apologize to someone who's gone? Can guilt be resolved if the person you harmed never knew you felt guilty? Or does guilt just become something you carry, another weight added to all the others, until your body breaks too? Until you become the person in someone else's 8 seconds, the one whose eyes show emptiness and pain while the world watches and calls it sport. Ali would fight for another 15 years after Cleveland Williams. Would lose his title, regain it, lose it again. Would refuse Vietnam and become a symbol of resistance. Would suffer in exile and return triumphant. Would beat Foreman in Zaire and Frazier in Manila and become not just a champion, but an icon. Would eventually develop Parkinson's, his own body slowly betraying him. His hands that had been so fast developing tremors, his speech slowing. His movement becoming labored, would spend his final decades as a living symbol of both greatness and its cost, revered globally while trapped in a body that no longer obeyed his commands. And sometimes, in quiet moments, he'd think about that night in Houston, about 8 seconds that nobody else remembered but he couldn't forget, about Cleveland Williams' eyes and what he'd seen in them, about the understanding that had passed between them. We're both products of a system that uses us up and discards us. The only difference is timing and luck, and how that understanding had changed nothing. Because understanding doesn't feed families, doesn't pay medical bills, doesn't stop bullets or create choices where none exist. Ali carried those 8 seconds the rest of his life. Not as guilt exactly, though guilt was part of it, but as knowledge. Knowledge that greatness is always built on someone else's pain. That every victory requires a defeat. That the man celebrating and the man being carried from the ring are both trapped in the same system, just experiencing it from different positions. That boxing, like America, like life, sorts people into winners and losers and pretends this sorting is fair, is earned, is about skill and determination rather than luck and circumstance, and who gets shot on a Texas highway. When his hands started shaking from Parkinson's, uncontrollable and constant, Ali would sometimes look at them and remember them throwing punches at Cleveland Williams. Would remember the power they'd had. Would remember using that power against a man who had none, and would wonder, is this justice? Is this karma? Or is this just what happens to everyone eventually? The strong become weak, the fast become slow, the mighty become mortal. And if it happens to everyone, why did we spend so much time pretending otherwise? Why did we build a sport on the illusion that some bodies were invincible when every body, given enough time and damage, breaks exactly the same way? 8 seconds of looking into Cleveland Williams' eyes taught Muhammad Ali that boxing was a lie dressed up as competition. A lie that said winners and losers were determined by skill and heart, when really they were determined by whose body broke first, whose luck ran out, who got shot, who got Parkinson's, who got remembered, who got forgotten. Both men died. One as a legend, hospitals and airports and streets named after him. One in obscurity, funeral notices in small print, name meaning nothing to most who read it. The world called one great and one tragic. But in those 8 seconds, Ali had seen the truth. They were both fighters. Both men with bodies that would eventually fail them. Both human. The only difference was story. The way the world chose to remember one and forget the other. And standing over Williams' body in that ring, hand raised in victory, Ali had understood something he'd spent his life trying to articulate. I'm beating a dead man. And one day, someone will beat me. And the crowd will cheer either way. Because that's what the crowd does. They cheer. And we die. And nobody asks if it was worth it until it's too late to answer. Was it worth it, Cleveland? Was the money enough? Did your family survive? Did the bullet kill you? Or did you die in Houston? Or did you die slowly over 30 years of pain and poverty? And if I'd stopped, if I'd refused to fight you, if I'd walked out of that ring, if I'd done something, would it have changed anything? Or would they have just found someone else to beat you? Someone less kind. Someone who wouldn't take those 8 seconds to really see you. I don't know. I'll never know. You're dead. I'm dying. And the 8 seconds we shared are mine alone now. Mine to carry. Mine to wonder about. Mine to wish I'd done differently, even though doing differently probably would have changed nothing. Except maybe I'd feel different. Maybe I'd sleep better. Maybe when my hands shake now, I wouldn't wonder if they're shaking from disease or from memory. From Parkinson's or from punishment. From age or from guilt. Because maybe the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Maybe these tremors are just 8 seconds, stretched across decades, refusing to let me forget that night I was great and you were broken and the world paid to watch. I'm sorry, Cleveland. I know you can't hear me. But I'm sorry. For the punches, for the silence after, for taking my victory and leaving you with your defeat, for being the one who survived while you slowly didn't. I'm sorry. And I hope, wherever you are, you know I saw you. Really saw you. For 8 seconds, I saw you. And I never forgot. Does that matter? I don't know. But it's all I have to offer. So take it. If you can. If the dead accept apologies from the dying. Take it. And forgive me if you can. Because I don't know how to forgive myself.